All right, I think I'm going to get started a minute early. So, hello, welcome. I'm Dennis McBride. I'm the Director of Special Education for the middle school. Charlie Hallman's here, who is the Executive Director of Special Education. And we have Darlene Heard-Thomas here from the ARC. So the program is about IEPs, and this is your meeting. Darlene is going to talk about everything, but she's here for questions. So the floor is all yours, and she's phenomenal, so we're really happy to have her here. So Darlene, it's all yours.
My ex-husband paid him to say I'm phenomenal, because I'm really not that phenomenal.
Yes, you are.
I am Darlene Thomas, advocate at the ARC of Western Wayne County, and we are located here in Westland. We try to help families of children and adults get the services that they need to make sure that their family member is living a happy, healthy, productive life in the community. For children, that means often educational services at school. For adults, it means services in the community like recreation, housing, employment, and access to the community to do the things that they're interested in doing as adults with developmental disabilities. We don't help persons who have mental illness as their primary disability. Their disabilities would need to be called and considered to be developmental disabilities, which means disabilities that a person acquired before they were an adult. So the purpose of the ARC is primarily to help children and adults with developmental disabilities. Now, Mr. McBride asked me tonight to talk about children and young adults who are attending school and who have IEPs or who might be in need of having an IEP. So that's what I'm going to talk about just briefly tonight. I would ask that if you have questions, personal questions, that you call the ARC after tonight's presentation. I left a business card, so you can call me. I'm in and out of the office quite a bit, but do call me if you have personal questions. I will save just a few minutes at the end for general questions about the IEP process itself. And at that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. I left several things on the table as you came in. A couple of the things I left were brochures about programs that we have at the ARC to address students as well as adults with disabilities. The brochures are pretty self-explanatory, but those are good resources to help you understand how to go forward accessing services in the community. I also left a couple of handouts. One is tonight's topic, individualized education program. And this handout is done by the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education. It's quite comprehensive in that it covers all the things that you as a parent need to consider when working with the school to develop and implement your child's IEP. And the other handout that I have also is from the State Department of Education. It's called Advocating for Your Child. And I think that I'll let you peruse this on your own. But I'm gonna go ahead and start talking about the handout called IEP. Now, for how many of you folks tonight have children that have IEPs? How many? Do you mind sharing? Some of you, most of you. And if you do, you already know an IEP is a written document, a legal form that details what supports the local school district will provide to your child from age 3 through 26 in public schools who is in need of supports and services to address your child's participation in general education. So I said a couple things there that I'd like to clarify. IEP supports and services and goals should be related to progressing in general education.
This way you can stay out here.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a hand talker
Yeah,
and
no, you're good, you're good.
don't know how to stay behind the podium, Charlie.
It's okay.
That's okay. We can adapt.
So the district will work with parents. They will invite you to participate in IEP meetings. If you suspect that your child has a disability but doesn't currently qualify, you should talk to the people at your child's school and say, this is something that's happening. My child is not making progress. They're having a hard time learning. And because of that, I want you to conduct an evaluation. Most often, the folks at school probably are seeing similar challenges with learning, making progress in the curriculum. And if you both agree, you should expect that there will be a meeting to discuss what type of evaluation the district is going to do. And you will be asked as a parent to give written consent for evaluation. And because you'll be asked to give consent, on page 2, it talks under IEPs or legal enforceable documents. You would also need to give consent, signing permission, giving the local team, the local school, permission to implement the IEP or the service plan for your child. IEPs are done annually updated. It's required unless the folks at school and you as a parent agree we don't need to make changes. Let's continue the IEP as it's written. But that's unusual. Sometimes it does happen but most often IEPs are updated annually. Now, IEPs can be held more than once a year, more than once annually, if there are changes in how the student is functioning, or if there's lack of progress in the IEP goal areas. So let's talk about what's in the IEP. If you look at page 1 of the IEP handout, it says Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's highlighted under what's in the IEP. That is federal law related to what local schools and state education agencies have to do and include in the IEP. Every IEP form might look different, but they need to include these 7 things in what they are summarizing for the student. Number 1, they need to include a statement about the present level of academic achievement. At what grade level is the student currently performing? That is determined by the local agency at least once annually, but often anymore, it's determined 3 or 4 times during the school year, correct?
Correct.
Tests like NWEA, I wish I remembered what that stands for, but it's an achievement test done 3 times a year, in the fall, in the winter, and towards the end of the school year,
Yes.
correct? It measures at what level a student is performing. And often you will see in the IEP itself a part that summarizes NWEA scores. Also, other achievement tests can be used and are often used by districts. iReady is a reading test, I believe, as well as Brigance is an achievement test. Those scores are used to determine what the goals for educating the student should be. And the present level statement should include assessments of reading, writing, math, social and emotional, as well as need for occupational and physical therapy. I was going to include a statement about science, but I have rarely seen that on an IEP form. Not to say it's not ever there, but most often. Reading, writing, math are the primary areas that are considered for determining the need for special education support. And important to point out, I think, that education is the primary reason for doing an IEP. So a student has autism or cerebral palsy or Diabetes. The IEP is written to accommodate those disabilities, but the IEP is not written to treat or give therapy for those conditions. And I hope that doesn't present any challenges, but IEP services are meant to help the student overcome the challenges or deficits related to their disability condition, to help them engage in learning and growth socially, emotionally, and adaptive abilities. So services that are needed therapeutically outside of school would need to be provided by professionals who do services in the community, medically, behaviorally, as well as other areas. So we talked a little bit about present levels. It summarizes where the child is currently performing, or the student. Number 2, under what's in the IEP, would be specific skills to be taught, or goals. And goals must be reasonable and achievable for the student. So if a student is in 2nd grade and their deficits are in reading or writing, it needs to be considered, how does that student with deficits in reading and writing compare to other students similar in age, and can they do the regular curriculum in order to compete? I hate to say that word, but it is sometimes comparable to making sure students are competing or measuring up to other children similar in age. If they're not measuring or comparatively performing to other children, then they would need to have goals to help them to acquire the skills that they need to be comparatively performing to other children similar in age. So goals is part of what's required under federal law to be in an IEP. The third thing that's required is a description of how the student's progress on the goals will be measured. How often is the local school district going to report to parents the progress that a student is making in their goal areas? So at least as often as a student without a disability is getting a progress report or report card, students with an IEP need to be also receiving a progress report related to goal achievement as well as grades. Similarly, time. The fourth point here is special education and related services such as speech, including supplementary aids and services, should be a part of the IEP. What does that mean? Special education and related services typically might look and include speech therapy, occupational or physical therapy. It also could include accommodations. What might be an accommodation in the IEP? It might be I'm drawing a blank.
Preferential seating.
Preferential seating, extended time for completing a test.
Reading a
All
text.
the other things.
Right to take a break.
Use of breaks.
Test reads.
Test read to the student if they have challenges understanding and following directions. Chunking of work. So chunking of work means don't have the student complete everything all at once. Break it into smaller parts so that they can show what they know and what they've learned, but have time enough to process what they've learned and what they know and can demonstrate it back to the teacher. Those are just small examples. Another support service might be including, often, I see this almost always now, a behavior intervention plan. A behavior intervention plan can be written for any student, but definitely should be considered for a student who has a disability and behavior is interfering with learning at school. So, behavior intervention plan can be part of supplementary aids and services. And there's a whole section of the IEP that will detail what supplementary aids and services a given student might need. The fifth point that the federal government requires that be considered in an IEP is the amount of time during the school day, if any, the student will spend apart from his peers without disabilities. This one's a big deal. Students with IEPs, to the maximum extent appropriate, need to be in general education settings. And only when the disability says they can't be in a general education setting do we consider an alternative placement. So, special education classrooms, pull-outs to resource room, and lack of engagement in extracurricular activities are things that need to be done only when the student's disability prevents them from being able to be in the general education setting with their peers. Peers are in high school 9 to 17 typically. So removal from peers needs to be considered when the severity, extent of disability prevents participation in general education. So on the IEP form itself, there will be a question about how much time is a student in general education. And usually that is reported in percentages. Help me with percentages, Mr. Holman.
student is in 3 to 5 hours per week, and so that would mean they're 20 to 30% special
So,
education.
and if there is more time in special education pullouts or general, self-contained classrooms, that would be also reported as a percentage. And the state measures, through their systems, how much time students with IEPs are spending outside of general ed, both academically as well as for related services and supports. That's one of their criteria for state monitoring. Number 6, the student's participation in state and district tests, including test accommodations. All students in the state of Michigan take standardized tests. And the state test, I think it's called the M-STEP for general education students, and the alternative test for students with IEPs who can't take the M-STEP is called My Access. And there are different levels of functioning for the alternative test called the My Access, but every student with an IEP, at the IEP meeting, it needs to be discussed what tests they're going to take and what the accommodations are that they might need, like tests in a separate location. If it's not an ELA test, maybe someone to read the test, as well as if the student might require time, a scribe for the test,
Extended time.
and extended time as well. Thank you, Mr. Holman.
No problem.
It is the end of the day.
Brain
And-
fog is real.
Pardon me?
Brain fog is real.
Yes, it is. I won't even go on down that rabbit hole because it's a deep one.
Yes, ma'am.
The 7th point of what needs to be included in the IEP is the projected start day for the services and modifications provided to the student, including where will the service happen, how often will the service happen, and for how long. Typically, the where is at school, but sometimes that's different. Sometimes services are provided at home for a student who cannot attend school in person, or it could be at a neutral meeting point, like a library. The where typically is at school, however. How often? There's usually a range of time for receiving a service, 20 to 30 minutes, 4 times a month, 4 to 6 times a month, and for how long typically is for the school year or the length of the IEP. So if an IEP is written in April 2024, that IEP is in effect till April of 2025 unless the team of folks on the IEP, the teacher, the administrator, the parent, you're a valuable member of the IEP team. Unless you give notice that I think the IEP needs to be updated before it expires in a year. And that is allowable. IEPs, again, can happen, IEP meetings can happen more than once a year if the needs of the student change, or if goals perhaps need to be updated. Sometimes that can be done through the amendment process, and a parent would need to be given notice of the change through an amendment and agree by signing the amendment or change to the IEP. Who are members of the IEP team? That's very important. Of course, the parent. And often the student, particularly when the student is of age to understand and offer input in their own IEP. No, not less than one general education teacher. So even if a student is in a self-contained program, there should be a general education teacher contributing to development of the IEP. Because again, IEP is related to education predominantly, and parents need to know what other kids without IEPs are learning so that they can understand what the implications are for a student not working in the general education curriculum. The alternative curriculum for students who have IEPs but who cannot do the work in general education is called Essential Elements, and it's similar to the Common Core education standards, but slightly different because students who have mild, moderate, or severe learning challenges require an alternative education curriculum. But even for those with severe disabilities, they need to be learning about the world just like every other student at school. So no just doing stuff that's not related to learning ELA, reading, writing, math, all the other Common Core essential element subjects. Students with disabilities are at school to learn and not, I hate to say this because sometimes I say it and parents get upset. It's not about learning to treat the disability condition. Sometimes we feel like kids need that, but school is about educating students to be productive, to learn ELA, writing, math, science, and to be the best student they can be and get support to overcome those challenges related to their disability condition. Another required member of the IEP team would be someone from the district who has the authority to represent the local agency, approve some of the requests that either the school team or the parent might have as an accommodation, modification, or support. So an administrator should be at an IEP team meeting if there's any challenge to what's necessary and needed, either on the part of the local district or the parent. It would be appropriate to ask that an administrator be invited to the IEP meeting. And at the discretion of the parent or the public school agency, you can invite someone like me to an IEP meeting to help often facilitate the discussion, to educate the parent about what is being proposed or refused, and to foster communication between the local school district and the family, the parents of the student. Finally, if you do not agree with the IEP that and the services and support that is being offered, you can reach out to mediation services. You can file a state complaint or file a due process hearing request. Or you can deny consent to get special education services completely. Parents have a lot of power in deciding the best when an IEP is developed. So lots of things to think about, and I would encourage you all to remember that students are in school to learn about the world, learn about it, because having a disability probably is not going to change greatly. Sometimes it can, but most often a student will have a disability for life. Take advantage of that time to learn about the world so that students, as they're going into adulthood, can decide who they want to be. Do I want to be a chef? Do I want to be a dancer or an athlete? And if I do, what services and supports do I need to be able to do those things? And who's going to help me do the things that I want to do to be smart and strong and good? That's my little bit. So if you all have questions about the IEP process itself, I'd welcome your questions, and we'll try to answer to the best.
So thank you very much for coming this evening. We've had some really robust questions. I want to give Darlene a round of applause for standing up here and just fielding everything for us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you, and all that you do. What I'll leave you with, and before I turn it over to our MC, this is how important the the arc of Western Wayne County is I have their number memorized, 729-9100. That's how closely we work together to make sure that we have what we need for kids. And so thank you all for coming. I heard some individual questions. Please don't hesitate to call that number. Darlene is
Please.
fantastic.
I left a card
Yep.
at the table.
So, and thank you, Dennis. Let's give him a round of applause. He's the one that put all this together tonight. So thank you.
Thank
Do
you
any of
both.
the work, though. Darlene did all the work. That being said, also, you can communicate with Darlene, obviously, the ARC, but also connect with your case coordinator, the teacher who does your special ed. If you don't get resolved there, contact the principal in your building, okay? And then it steps up to your level director, which would be middle, high school, elementary, like myself, Ann or Mona. So if you don't get those results, please reach out. If we don't hear it, we don't know it,
Yeah,
okay?
communication
Yeah,
with
it's
the
huge.
people in your child's building,
Yeah,
the people who support your child is critical. Because if
absolutely.
you don't have a good working relationship with those people who do the work, they are invested in educating students, not in treating disability, but educating. I'm
And re-
sorry, but disability conditions,
Yeah,
I know, because
I
I
know.
was a parent.
and remember,
Disability conditions has to be secondary when you're asking a district to educate your child.
you
I
have
know this.
the typical relationship is 12 years. We last longer than marriages, a lot of marriages. So you're going to have 12 years at the minimum with us. So it behooves us to have a good relationship. Some of us are 26 years. It could be 26 years if we start with 0 and we go all the way then. So we last longer than a lot of marriages. So we're here to work with you, for you, and
talk
help
to my
you.
ex-husband.
So please reach
saying
out to
that.
us, let us know. Start with case coordinator, your principal, and then move up the chain, okay? So, and again, if you have any questions, comments for her or us, please reach out.
And my business card is on the table. I'm at the ARC. Most
24/7.
days. Not 24/7. I'm out of the office quite a bit.
Going to
but
kids' IEPs
do
and meeting
leave
with
a
parents. So.
message. Do leave a
Yes.
message, and I'll try to respond and get back to you within 24 to 48 hours.
All right, again, thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
all.
coming.
Thank
I
you
know
for
it's
your
70
attention,
degrees out and it was a
and thank
beautiful
you for your
day. So
time.
thank you so much for coming.